to jump into Acts 27, kind of pick up where we were last week, because there's so much detail here that is just absolutely phenomenal. So, what do we know so far, okay, about Paul's shipwreck? We know they left Fairhaven with a southerly breeze, okay, and they were trying to make it to the Phoenix Harbor. The problem is as soon as they got around the corner of the island, they ended up being caught in a northeaster. Very, very heavy, intense storm. So they let the ship go with the wind because they had no choice. They could not tack again into the wind to get to the direction that they needed to go. And the other thing that we know is that out of concern for the ship breaking apart, what they did was they were towing the dinghy behind them, and they brought the dinghy on board, and then they took the cables that they were using to tow the dinghy, and they strapped those under the ship to keep the planking from coming off the ship, because the storm is pretty bad. The wind was blowing them towards the coast of Africa. And it says that they were concerned that they would run aground in Sirtis. Now, Sirtis is not a very hospitable place. It's desert. There's no water. There's nothing, you know. It's sand dunes. And so they were concerned about running aground in Sirtis, and so they lightened the ship by throwing the cargo overboard. The third day of this storm, they threw the tackle overboard, the ship's tackle. Also, we know that they have no sun or stars, so they can't navigate. They have no clue as to where exactly they are, because they can't see the stars and they can't see the sun because of the storm.
Fully in God's mercy, and they didn't even know it.
Yeah. Yeah.
What'd she say?
Here's Hannah. I said, fully at God's mercy, and they didn't even know it. They were literally, you know, it was completely God's control.
And Sirtis is in Libya anyway.
Well, it's on the north coast of Africa.
Yeah.
On the continent of Africa. So Sirtis is a very inhospitable place. You know, I mean, they are concerned because they're being driven that direction, and you know, they don't know what's going on. They're worried about it, so they lighten the ship. They throw the cargo overboard. The third day, they threw the tackle overboard, and after 14 days, okay, they sent the sailors on board, sense that they're approaching land. Okay, and so they start taking soundings. Okay, the soundings came back at 120 feet, and then they came back at 90 feet. You know, so they know, hey, it's getting more shallow. You know, they are. Come on in. They are in. You know, they've confirmed essentially that they are in fact, you know, approaching land at this point. So, what do? They're worried about running aground, and it's pitch black. This is at night. So they throw 4 anchors over the stern, okay, to try and stop the boat, and they pray for morning. They throw 4 anchors over the stern of the boat, and they're praying that, okay, well, because they can't see what's going on. It's pitch black. okay, because of the storm. So the next morning, they eat some food and they lighten the ship further by tossing the grain over. This was their only chance because they can see this sandbar or rocky outcropping or whatever that's in their way. And they're trying to make it through that. And they, there is a divot or whatever, if you will, that they're going to try and shoot through, in the midst of the sandbar. They have very limited steering. And remember, this is a huge ship. There were 276 people on board this ship. Okay? It's a grain freighter.
This translation says there were 226.
Yeah, I don't know how they got that.
About what?
220, her translation says 226.
I'm sorry, I can't read.
Does it say 276?
This says 276.
Okay. That makes sense, yeah.
Page 26 what?
276 people on board this ship is what we know from the scriptural account. And plus all the freight. It is a freighter. It is a grain hauler that typically was used to haul grain from Egypt to Rome. Okay? And so they eat and then they toss the grain. They have to lighten the ship. The grain is all in the bottom of the hold, and it's like ballast, which has helped keep the ship stable. But in order for them to make it through the sandbar, they need to be riding as high in the water as possible. So they know that everything's lost, so they start bailing the grain overboard. We know that it says that they did not recognize the land. Okay, so the sailors had no idea where they were at. They did not recognize the land. We find out later that they only find out after they get on land that the island is Malta. Well, the sailors have been to Malta before, but not this particular bay, because this is in a different part of the island. Okay, they saw a bay with a beach. Okay. So what did they do? They cut the anchors and left them in the sea, and they hoisted the sail, and they undid the steering mechanism, if you will, and they are flying. Okay. And it says that the ship gets grounded on a place where two seas meet. This means that you have very violent waves coming together from two different directions, basically on either side of this sandbar, if you will. So those are very, very specific terms that we learn about, okay, from the scriptural account. Okay, so we know that they were headed towards the coast of Africa. They eventually were able to get turned around, and they're headed northwest at that point in quite a large arc. Okay, they've got no sun or stars, so they don't have any way to navigate. They don't know where they're at. After 14 days of this storm, they sense that they're approaching land. They take soundings. They find that they have a 120-foot depth, and then they have a 90-foot depth. So they're approaching land, and so that's the point where they throw the 4 anchors over, because they don't want to be crushed on the rocks. In the morning, they further lighten the ship. They don't recognize the land, but they saw a bay with a beach. So they cut the anchors and leave them behind, and they end up getting grounded on a place where two seas meet. Okay? And the ship ends up getting broken apart. So we find in verse 39 of Acts 27, it says, when it was day, they did not recognize the land, but they observed a bay with a beach, unto which they had planned to run the ship if possible. And they let go of the anchors and left them in the sea, meanwhile loosening the rudder ropes. And they hoisted the mainsail to the wind and made for the shore. But striking a place where two seas met, they ran the ship aground, and the prow stuck fast and remained immovable. But the stern was being broken up by the violence of the waves. And the soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners, lest any of them should swim away and escape. But the centurion, wanting to save, remember Julius, the centurion, wanting to save Paul, kept him from their purpose and commanded that those who could swim should jump overboard first and get to land. And the rest, some on boards and some on parts of the ships, but it was that all escaped safely to land. And remember, Paul had prophesied, okay, that no one was going to lose their, my borders is in, that no one was going to lose their life in this, you know. And, you know, the centurion remembered that prophecy, I'm sure, and I'm sure he regretted not listening to Paul in Fairhaven when he said, hey, we should winter here and not move on, you know, and they decided to press on, you know, in spite of that, you know. And so, you know, and Julius, I think, had, you know, some commitment to Paul, because, you know, remember very early on in their first stop that Paul was given liberty. You know, the centurion trusted Paul. He was given liberty to go visit with friends in that port, you know, and everything. So, you know, there is somewhat of a relationship here, you know, and I think we're gonna see that progress as we move on. And then the first verse of Acts 28 says, now when they had escaped, they then found out that the island was called Malta. They didn't realize that they were on Malta until after they got on land, because they talked to the natives. Okay, they didn't know that. You know, most of those sailors probably had been to Malta before, but on the ports, the bay that are on the north end of the island, because that's where the Roman garrison was. It was a major shipping port, you know. You know, Bob Carnucci describes it as the O'Hara Airport of the Mediterranean. You know, there was a lot of activity in and out, but it was all on the other end of the island. That's where the cities were. That's where the major ports were. And that's why the sailors did not recognize the land. They were in a bay on the southern end of the island that they'd not been to before. They didn't know where they were at. So it wasn't until they actually got on the island and were able to talk to the natives that they found out that the island was called Malta. You know. So it makes a lot of sense as to what was going on. You know, because they were all used to the ports on the northwestern side. So we're gonna take a diversion here and watch a video. Okay. And for those who are watching on YouTube, you can do a search on YouTube for The Lost Shipwreck of Paul by Bob Carnucci, and it should come up. You know, because I'm going to stop the stream here for obvious reasons.